Well, John, I was just going to say, how did you get here?
How did I get here? All right, let's revert back to the year 1968, July. A friend of mine, Rick Firth, who she knows, who's no longer with us, but he and I were working a development down in Kentucky called Perry Park. I got a phone call from a gentleman that I used to work with as a fellow realtor in Indiana. He was going to be the sales manager of a development called Ocean Pines, which is near Ocean City. And he called me and asked me if I was interested in joining the sales staff. So I said, when would you want me there? That was my answer. When would you want me there? Ocean City, the ocean? Yeah, I'm in.
Sure.
He says, yesterday. I said, well, I can't make it yesterday, but I'll get there as soon as I can. This was in around the 4th of July, 68. So I can remember Rick and I pulled into town in around the 7th day of July, 68. And we went to the house that was being utilized on the corner of 5th Street and the Boardwalk. That's where the crew was staying. So we stayed there for a couple of months until I rented a place at the Westward Ho, the old Westward Ho, years ago.
Yes, West Ocean City, right.
And then the opening day was Friday, July the 12th of 1968. I remember that day, and they introduced John Howard Burbage, who was then the mayor of Berlin, and he bought the first lot, supposedly, but actually he didn't. There were two people that were bought lots that they were actually recorded on the 12th day of July, and I had the names, but I didn't bring it with me. I forgot. But that was the opening day, July the 12th of 68, and a big gathering and all the to-do, you know, from Berlin and what have you. And then the next day, Saturdays, when the people started coming in, and that was the beginning. So that's how I got there. And how did you get there?
Well, at the time, my husband was an officer in the United States Navy, and I liked being a Navy officer's wife, but the next place he would have gone would have been swift boats in Vietnam, and decided that was not a good career move. He did his 6.5 years. He graduated from OCS, Officers Candidate School, after he graduated from the University of Maryland, which is where we met. And so his brother, who had been a 3M salesman, Dave, called Dick up and said, you know, you want to come to the ocean and sell land for a company called Boise Cascade and a coming community called Ocean Pines. And of course, he said, sure. And I said, yes, dear, you know, that kind of a thing. So we came with 2 young kids. Laurie was probably about 6, and Beth was just a little baby. Actually, it would have been 4, and because she was born in February, so she was just a little baby when we came here. And it was literally a dirt road into the woods.
Oh yeah, I remember that. Yeah, you mentioned about 6.5 years in the service. I remember when I was getting out of the Army, they had a circular going around. If you weren't happy with your present MOS, that was the job assigned to you, you could volunteer to be an advisor in a place called Vietnam.
Oh, yeah, right.
So in conversing with my buddies, you know, I don't think I want to go to Vietnam. I knew where Vietnam was. And I said, no, I don't want to go there. So I got out of the Army at that time, and that's how then I gravitated down here. Yeah.
That was a whole bunch of it was almost like a community of lot salesmen. I mean, they had been what they called tin men, which was selling vinyl siding, and encyclopedia
and
salesmen.
Dirt peddlers.
Lot lizards, we used to call them
different
fondly.
nicknames. From all over the United States.
Right, all over the United States.
Because I remember I had worked in Illinois and Indiana, Kentucky, and gosh, another one I forget, but then ended up here. And
like
once I was here, I liked it. I said, I like this place. I think I'm going to stay. And bought my first lot and built and what have you.
Right.
The rest is history.
It was an interesting time because there were very few houses.
Oh, yeah.
And there was, community of Ocean City was not year round. I mean, they literally rolled up the sidewalks.
Labor Day.
On Labor Day.
Yep.
And there was not a hotel, motel, or restaurant that was open in the wintertime.
Well, they had the city lunch down there. We used
lunch.
to go there a lot. And then on weekends, they'd have restaurants that would open.
Sure.
But you were right. Basically, the town closed up Ocean City.
Right. And at one point in time, they had put one of the Boise Cascade houses, the rotunda, out here in the parking lot of the beach club. And that's where the beach girls would go up and down
Well, actually, that building that you just referred to is now up in Delaware.
Yeah, it's Larry's Homes.
Yeah, right, very good. And that was right on the edge of the road, and we used to pull duty, the agents would pull duty on that, where we have assignment to be there certain hours during the day.
Right.
And that's how we would meet prospects and try and entice them to take a tour across the bay to see Ocean Pines.
Mm-hmm. And then a lot of the salesmen had regular jobs up in the cities, the Baltimore, Washington, Philadelphia, Wilmington area. They would run leads, as they called them. They had a boiler room, telephone banks, a bunch of girls that would call up, and they would somehow just go down a street. They would get the phone numbers, and they would just go on Elm Street, and then the salesman, they would say, would you like to come down? Would you like to hear a sales pitch about a wonderful community in Ocean City, whatever. Free weekend, right. Yeah. And then they figured out that the way to get the people to really show up here was to take a $5 bill and staple it to the card. But you would get the $5 back when you took your tour. And they found out that people who didn't give $5 sometimes didn't show up. But if they got the $5, that was enough to make them come down here.
Quite a few of them would take advantage of the free overnight stay in a motel and free meals, but that's all part of business. And we would then remember the Luaus.
Oh yes.
In this particular, right up here.
Right.
They used to have luau's where the salespeople would have to wear a Hawaiian shirt and put a lei around. And then you'd be seated at a table with 2 or 3 couples.
Right.
And during conversation, you would talk about Ocean Pines, the advantage of the community, and entice them into taking a tour the next day, across the bridge to show them around Ocean Pines and try and sell them a lot. A friend of mine who was a salesman with me over here at Ocean Pines, Danny Parsons, remember Danny?
I remember
He's
Danny.
now deceased, nice person. He and I were the first people, per se, the first human beings to cross the bridge. Here's what we did. It was during construction. And he came up with the idea, and I said, you know what, let's do it. I think we had a couple drinks. So we would drive starting on the other side, coming towards Ocean City. I would get out of the car and move the barriers, and then we'd move a little bit more, and that took quite a bit of time, but we actually drove all the way across and then turned around, drove all the way back, and then as we were driving back, I put the barriers back in place. But we actually were the first ones to drive across the bridge unofficially.
Right.
Remember that.
Right, and I'm sure Boise Cascade knew that Route 90 was going to come right through the community.
I think they had an inkling, yeah.
Yes,
because that was a big sales tool.
Exactly, and I think we're so fortunate to have had Boise because they had such deep pockets.
Yes, first it was U.S. Land Inc., and then Maryland Marine Properties Inc., and then Boise Cascade. But in reference to the bridge, once that was done, they used to hold some heavy-duty luau's right here, and then they would drive them across the bridge. So we really didn't do that. What we did do prior to the bridge, they would fly people in from, as Marlene mentioned, Washington, Baltimore, Philly, and also Charleston, West Virginia, because they sent me and another guy down to Charleston, West Virginia to drum up some business. But anyway, they would fly them in, and I have a picture of the plane on the table somewhere here among all this debris. They'd fly them in. We would meet them at the airport, Ocean City Airport, drive them into the community, tour them, try and sell them, and then they would stay at the designated hotel, and they get their meals. But I remember that. Ocean Pines had a plane.
Yeah, as well as a 2-story double-decker bus.
From England. Yeah.
From England, a red double-decker bus, which they would pick people up and take them back over to Ocean Pines and tour them. And of course, we know that they had the
Amy Ross.
The Amy Ross, right. And that was, the Amy Ross.
That was a neat little boat when they would take people across, as Marlene mentioned, over here, and then try and convince them to get involved and what have you.
Right. They had a harbor there at big indentation there at the Swim and Racket Club. Well, then they would take them, everything was at the North Gate.
Correct.
And they had a big red and white striped tent there back behind where Dawn Isle is now. There was a big, that was all parking lot. And then they had a big red and white striped tent in the summertime where people could go in and what was this, Smoot?
Emerson T. Smoot. We called him Emerson T. Smoot and Mrs. Smoot. And they used to, on Friday afternoons, we'd have sales meetings, and they would cook up hot dogs and hamburgers and homemade dishes, and we would all dig in after our sales meeting with home-cooked goodies, compliments of him and his wife.
Right, and I think that they, fed the up, and that was what they called an up.
An up was a
because
couple that came in.
When somebody came in the room, you got up. it was an up. that's it wasn't rocket scientist, but that's how you got the name.
And if the husband came without the wife, it was called a one-legged up.
One-legged up. Mm-hmm.
Right. Because one time I remember,
took them out, but they weren't going to make a decision.
Well, this one time there was a gentleman from Wilmington who came without his wife. It was my turn, so I was called up to the upboard where the map was, and Bill Gibbs. So John, I'm going to introduce you to this her. He had a real deep voice and said he's in a position where he can make a decision without his wife. I said, is that right? And the man said, yeah, this guy was a big guy, muscular guy, a former Navy officer. So I have a reason for saying that, because we progressed, we went on the tour. So I asked him, you really like this lot and all that? And so, you ready to, he said, well, I'd have to confer with my wife. I said, wait a minute. Don't you remember what the...
Right.
So we got into a friendly, heated discussion, and I asked him, I said, that you did say that you were in a position to make a decision without your wife, and you look like a man of true character, so I'm going to assume you were telling the truth. So he says, okay, so he reluctantly signed the contract, but you got to drive up to Wilmington tomorrow to get the check and get my wife to sign the papers. So I did. And then a couple years later, I remember I ran into him and he thanked me. He says, I'm glad that you kindly pressured me into doing it because we really like it here. And I wasn't really going to do it that day, but you kind of put the heat on me. And I'm glad you did because we really like Ocean Pines. So it had a happy ending.
If somebody doesn't know, Boise Cascade is the owner of Kingsbury Homes. You can still buy a Kingsbury home today. Mm-hmm. And it made real sense to them to come here and be able to sell their houses. They did not restrict that, a la some other subdivisions that are very close around here. Yeah. They allowed any builder to come in, but that was really what most of the homes were Kingsbury homes. Yeah. And I have an original brochure of all the Concord and
it's in here, yeah.
Right.
Speaking of that, Boise Cascade at one time had over 20 developments throughout the United States. And I had the opportunity to visit at one time the two most efficient developments were Ocean Pines and Lake Arrowhead in California. And my daughter lives in California, so we took a trip up. I wanted to see Lake Arrowhead, real nice development at the top of a mountain. I'll never forget, it was about 72 degrees when we first started up the mountain. It took us a long time to get up. When we got to the top of the mountain where the lake was, there was over a foot of snow on the homes. And just think of that, 72 degrees on the ground, and then you spent a half an hour going around all these windy roads to get to the lake, snow on the steps of the homes. And it was very cold. I mean, we didn't have a jacket. We were freezing. Then when you're done, you go down to the bottom of the hill, 72 degrees.
Yeah, I always heard that Incline Village out in Lake Tahoe was the first one.
Yeah,
and then a close one is Lake of the Woods in Northern Virginia, and then the other one is the Hideout in the Pocono Mountains near Lake Wallenpaupack.
Yep.
Lake Wallenpaupack. We did spend some time, Dick was sales manager.
That's right. I remember when Dick was the sales manager.
Mm-hmm, we were back and forth, and that was called a lake community. Mm-hmm. They actually created a couple of lakes, but their claim to fame was they had the shortest ski tow in the world or whatever. It was not very much of a mountain. It wasn't really the Poconos, but certainly, the thing that we were most fortunate of, I think, was to have Boise Cascade with deep pockets.
Yes, absolutely.
And the integrity to put a central water sewer system in. Totally unheard of. To buy a whole city block of oceanfront land, because there is no other community anywhere in Worcester County. I don't even know of anywhere on the East Delmarva Peninsula, that has and I used to call it the umbilical cord between there and the ocean. All the swimming pools, the Robert Trent Jones designed PGA approved golf course. Yeah. Billy Casper was our original touring pro, and he used to come every once in a while and do a clinic or whatever. It was a pleasure because I think everybody felt that they were really, it was a solid community. It was going to be, even though sometimes you didn't tell quite the right, someday we're going to have a Food Lion and a Walmart and a post office.
Well, the original amount of money that Boise proclaimed they would put into the community was around $48 million. It ended up being more. Mm-hmm. In today's dollars, much, much, much more. Right. Before they bought the land, they sent a land procurement team, a couple of guys would go around the country and find properties that would be geographically accessible to a metro area, which would make sense because that's where the people would come from that would buy. And they did a study here and they found out that this would be an ideal spot. And thus the community came about. And speaking of the area, there were three, and you probably know this, there were three families that owned in the 3,500 acres of Ocean Pines. It's in here somewhere. And then, of course, they sold their property to, as it turned out, Boise Cascade, first going the different companies prior to Boise. Yeah. And a little bit about selling, I'll tell you a couple things about selling lots. I mentioned waterfront lots and golf course lots. Right. I would take a couple, this is in the very beginning, the early days, to a designated lot that was going to be waterfront. So what they did was they would have a stake on one end on the road, or a stake on the other end with a ribbon, and then stakes on the rear to show the four sites. So we would walk back to the site, which was supposedly where the bulkhead or the seawall was going to be. Meanwhile, there's nothing there. And on the other side, the width of the canal, the future canal on the other side, were stakes to designate that. So I would be standing there telling the customers, this is going to be a waterfront lot. There will be a bulkhead here. Now you see the stake in the middle with the blue ribbon because it was a red ribbon and a red ribbon to designate the end of the lot, And in the middle was a blue ribbon. That's going to be the center of the canal. What's the depth going to be? Oh, it would be over my head, which it is. And the guy's standing there saying, he's looking at tree trunks sticking out of the ground, and there's going to be a seawall, and there's going to be a canal there with water in it. And some people did have the vision to believe what we were portraying, and some did not. Those didn't buy. Those that did bought. And those early birds got some really good buys, even though at the time it was expensive per the dollar value of then versus today. But the early birds got some really good buys, as they did.
John. Do you remember? I mean, you all were selling lots for $4,000 and $5,000.
Correct. It started out basically around $34.95, whatever, but then it went to like $4,000. Then it went to $49.95. The big thing was the $49.95 for one off the water and a waterfront. I remember I sold the least expensive waterfront that I ever sold was $8,000 for a waterfront. Right.
Because they went rapidly to 10, 11, 17. By the time they got to Teal Bay, they were in $17,995 and $21.95.
And we were saying, man, that's a lot of money. Think people will buy these?
Right.
If I could go back in time with a lot of money, I would have bought a lot of property if I had that crystal ball to take with me.
Golf course properties were $79.95, $89. Because,
actually, I sold some for $5,000 or $6,000 in the early days, but you're right, they progressed on up. Yeah.
They did. That was part of their sales technique, to start in at a low number and say, well, we have no more $5,000 lots. Correct. This week. The price is going up, and they did use some sales techniques, and myself and my two daughters were part of the sales technique. Because I wasn't working then, so we would go to the park to play to show there was some play. But then, if they needed what was called a push, they had CB radios in there. There were 30 Mercury Marquis station wagons that the Boise Cascade provided to the salesmen, all of which had CB radios in there. And they had somebody that was called base. And then there would be these codes that the salesman would use. All the salesmen had a code. And if you said, I'm 1030 with, Mr. And it was always, John would say, base, this is John Talbott, and I have Mr. and Mrs. Jones from Wilmington, Delaware in my car, and we're going to go out and look at property. And base would say, welcome to Ocean Pines, have a nice day, whatever. But if John got to the point where he knew that they were going to buy something, he had a code that said,
It's still on the market.
it's still on the, he would call in and he'd say, I know I'm not supposed to ask this, but is that lot on Bramblewood still available?
Still on the market.
Still on the market, right.
That was
and
the
when
code.
the rest of the salesmen who didn't have customers and people in their the back seat, we would have like 5 or 6 or 7 cars all of a sudden end up on Bramblewood. They would come pick me up and my 2 daughters and pair me with a salesman who wasn't selling anything, but we would be a family. And so we would go in this car and we would go out, and actually they'd have me, I'd put one daughter on one corner and we'd walk the lot, and the people in the car and the salesman would just get, I can't believe that I look at the best inventory, and these salesmen, they copy me all the time or whatever. I don't know that, whether the property's still available. And the people would say, well, John, what are those people doing on our lot?
And then I would say, oh my gosh, here comes Frank. He's one of the best salesmen on our staff. He knows this lot's available. It just became available. He's going to try and sell it. Oh my, here comes Lou. Look, this is one of the better lots on the street. Are you interested? Well, I think we are. Do you want this lot? If you don't, they're going to buy it. Do you want this lot? Then you would call in. Base, this is unit 19. Pull the card on lot number XYZ, and then they would say, we've just pulled the card on lot XYZ for Mr. and Mrs. Jones from Wilmington, Delaware. Congratulations. And then we would write up, our office was the car. Right. We would write up the paperwork in the car using the steering wheel as the desk.
Or the hood.
And then we would turn it in, and then that was it.
And they would go to a sales trailer where the potties are and the Southgate Lake walks around. There used to be a couple of sales trailers down there, and it would go in the sales trailer. And because it was a new development, and people could use their MasterCard for the $500 down, because Boise Cascade offered owner financing, 10% down, 10% interest for 10 years. Mm-hmm. They'd go out the other end with a deed in their hand. They had 3 or 5 days to write a rescission, but they would settle on it.
But there was a woman that worked in the, what you would do is you would take the contract and you go to the office you just mentioned, and you'd give it to the infamous Becky. All the salesmen, this woman, she wasn't that big, but boy, she had every salesman afraid of her. I mean, hi, it's John, I got a contract for you. And she would yell at us and scream at us, and man, let me out of here. Right. We all remember Becky, yeah. Mm-hmm. She ran the ship.
And of course, in the beginning, there was a gate guard at the north gate. Elmer Hastings was one of the first gate guards. They weren't uniformed. I mean, I don't even think they were uniformed. Maybe they wore a darker cap. No. But you had to have somebody lift a gate. There was a pole there at the north gate, and the south gate at that point in time was a chain across it. They didn't even have that. But then eventually they had a little hut down there, which was the gate to go out. They've since moved that hut or the gatehouse to the racket. It became the handball warming hut or whatever. But you had to do that. And then after many years, I found that when I got I got my license in '78. I found out that they would not allow VA funding in Ocean Pines because it was a private community. Yeah. And so a couple of realtors went to the board at the time and said, you're really not providing the security. We have our own private police force, which is another thing that Boise did, our own police force and our own fire department. But they redid the security aspect. Mm-hmm. They beefed up the police department, and they took the gates down so that we could, the veterans could be take advantage of that. Some of the things may say a private recreational community, but that...
She said it right, private recreational community, which in the beginning was being portrayed as a summer getaway, if you will, vacation type community, but needless to say, it's the largest community in the county today.
Right. It was the third largest population center on the Eastern Shore for 3 months of the year.
Yep.
Salisbury, Elkton, and Ocean Pine.
Look at this.
Yes, I've got some pictures. When Boise got out of here, I took a lot of stuff, and this was a an aerial shot of what Ocean Pines looked like before Boise Cascade got in here. And it shows here, the second one, probably a year and a half later, not much, how much land they actually created. And I don't know if John knows the number, but I've always said it's about 1,000 waterfronts, but I'm not sure.
Slightly more, I think, but not,
Right. It was a really small community. The other thing that what I was part of, which was because we've eventually, most of the salesmen, some of the other younger families who work for Boise, not sure who else, but we had probably 20, 25 kids that wanted to go to the public school.
Mm-hmm.
And at the time, Worcester County said, we're not bringing the school buses in to pick up the kids in Ocean Pines because, it's too hard. And, so we had to take our kids to St. Martin's Lane and Beecham Road at 8 o'clock in the morning, and the bus would come down Beecham Road, pick up the kids, and then they would drop them back off. Because there was a gate there also. That was a gate that's the truck route, because you couldn't get school buses, fire trucks, and Cisco or Coors Light trucks over the North Gate Bridge. And that was one of the benefits of the early development, because Boise had, and I want to call him, the three-piece suit Chicago lawyer that represented Boise Cascade nationwide or whatever. Mm-hmm. They went down to the county commissioners and said, let's see, part of the taxes that we're paying goes for public schools. So I think our only, recourse is to withhold that amount of taxes that we're paying. Within 2 weeks, we had the buses come into Ocean Pines. They came in St. Martin's, but they went up Ocean Parkway to the North Gate, made a U-turn, and picked up the kids. One of the biggest bus stops was at Sandy Hook. And there was even a couple of little sheds that the kids could stay in. But they went on Ocean Parkway. At the time, it wasn't even on the south side, but that was how we got the buses into Ocean Pines. And the county built Shell Elementary School because of the amount of population of year-round people. We came here in May of '69, and that was when there was houses that were up. They were.
John King, remember John King?
He was on Cove Lane.
Floretta Field.
Right. Floretta was on Frigate.
Yeah, Frigate Run.
Right. And the Harrisons, who used to own the Enchanted Forest in Ellicott City, built 3 houses on Driftwood because he bought one for himself and his 2 kids on Driftwood. But that was used in a lot of their publications.
Yeah.
It was a magical time. Things were to be part of the community. And John's lived in here just like I have for that amount of time. And selling real estate, we could live anywhere. But our choice is Ocean Pines. Nothing like it.